Insight Quarterly Magazine. Issue 17. June to Sep 2020. Compiled and edited by Justin Phillips, Sathya B. Transcribed and printed by Mitra Jyothi. In collaboration with Radio Udon. Subscription Rs100 yearly. Mitra Jyothi Digital Library. Mitra Jyothi. CA Site No. P22, 31st Main, 18th Cross, HSR Layout. Sector 1, behind NIFT College, Bangalore 560102. Phone, 080-22587623/25. Email, mj.tblibrary@gmail.com. Website of Mitra Jyothi. Copyright notice. This book is reproduced in accessible format for people with bona fide print disabilities by Mitra Jyothi, CA Site No. P22, 18th Cross, 31st Main, Sector 1, HSR Layout, behind NIFT College, Bangalore 560-102. Phone No. 22587623/22587625, Country Code +91, Bengaluru Code 080, Email mj.tblibrary@gmail.com, Website of Mitra Jyothi. This book is created for distribution for the print disabled only and in accordance with the Marrakesh Treaty ratified by India on July 24, 2014 and Section 52, 1, ZB, of the Copyright Act, 1957. This accessible format production of the original publication is permitted to be used only by persons with print disabilities. Any further reproduction, distribution to any person without a print disability or any commercial use of this book is strictly prohibited and will be subject to legal action. Contents. From the editor. News from Mitra Jyothi. News from Out and About. For in memoriam. Mr. Prasannakumar Pincha from Radio Udon team. 5 phases of clinical trials. 6A record conjoined twins. 7 my employment journey being autistic Ashish Sridhar. 8 the best lesson of my life Chandana Chandrasekhar. 9 potluck at Paradise Shanti Anandi Vishwanathan. 10 a ballad of ineffable love Cynthia Singh. 11 how Carlos Ghosn escaped Japan. 12 recipe corner MS. Sundareswari. 1 from the editor. Dear readers, the whole world continues to be ravaged by the deadly consequences of COVID-19. Wearing face masks, sanitizing hands frequently, wearing gloves, maintaining social distancing, staying safely at home, young children and aged parents above 60 years not being encouraged in public, loss of jobs and economy, increased stress in life, depression, anxiety, not being able to go to school or eat food in hotels are the new normal. All shopping complexes, theaters, and religious places are empty. Industries are getting closed or removing employees from jobs. COVID warriors such as doctors, nurses, ASHA health workers, police personnel, bank employees etc. are struggling to help the needy and affected persons. When will this problem solve? When do we get a vaccine? When will the situation become normal? Will we get jobs? How to earn our livelihood and what is the future are all challenging questions we have with no answers. Situation is more challenging for the persons with disabilities. We find it hard to travel by bus. We need to depend on others to complete many tasks. People have fear to touch and help us to cross roads. Autos, Uber, Ola, and Rapido apps are expensive these days. Because of masks, the deaf cannot read the facial expressions or lip movements of others. On the other hand, digital technology is enabling work from home and to study at home through TV, radio, mobile, and computers. Health consciousness, nutrition, yoga, regular exercises, meditation, reading books and magazines, gardening and increased bonding with each other are good changes that have begun to emerge during this pandemic. Please continue to keep yourself and your family safe in these trying times. Enjoy the array of stories, articles, and a poem that are presented for your enjoyment. You are welcome to submit your own contribution too for upcoming issues. Justin Phillips, Editor. 2 News from Mitra Jyothi. Mitra Jyothi team is working hard to support the people in need during this pandemic situation. Sharing few key activities happened recently to spread across for the benefit of people in need. Team had converted the PDF version of India Yearbook 2020 to EPUB format and distributed the same to our beneficiaries who are preparing for competitive exams. Also uploaded the same in Shugamaya Pustakalaya as well for wider audience. India Yearbook, IYB, is an annual book that has ministry-wise or department-wise chapters, and it's a compilation of information that is available on the relevant ministry websites. For UPSC aspirants, this book comes handy for current affairs preparation of civil services exam. We do have the new National Education Policy in accessible formats like DAISY/MP3/EPUB/Braille at Mitra Jyothi. Please contact our library at 080-22587623 or mail tomjatelibrary@mitrajyothi.org to get a Braille copy if required. Another key outcome of last quarter is, team produced complete Karnataka State Syllabus 10 THSTD Maths and Science books in DAISY format and distributed to a special school. Maths using Chatty Infti tool and Science via human recording. First complete Maths book via digital method from Mitra Jyothi with quality output after a year-long struggle. Now we are all set to go to come up with more Maths books. Cricket Solutions conducted online Global Accessibility Awareness Day, GAAD, event in association with Mitra Jyothi to create awareness around accessibility and various challenges faced by persons with disabilities, especially in this pandemic situation. This is the 6th year we are conducting this event. This year the event was held virtually. We had a couple of short sessions introducing GAAD and accessibility, a session on cognitive disorders and the impact of technology followed by a panel discussion. At Mitra Jyothi we do celebrate Helen Keller's Day every year to spread awareness and motivate people, especially persons with disabilities, through different activities. This year as well we conducted a small event for the staffs since couple of them were new to disability sector. Ms. Madhu Singhal shared few words about the life of Helen Keller and the struggles Keller took to overcome the challenges. She highlighted the skill Keller had to understand people's speech by reading their lips with her hands. To demonstrate the challenge in understanding others' speech without hearing, Ms. Madhu arranged for an activity where the staffs has to wear the headphones with high volume and understand others' speech through lip reading. The activity created awareness among staffs, helped to understand the pain and struggle of the people with disabilities. The life of Helen Keller tells us that there is no barrier for achieving our dreams. In parallel we are creating awareness in general public and ensuring through possible means that visually impaired community is getting necessary support to overcome this tough situation. Request all our friends to stay safe and take care of your health, looking forward for a normal routine at the earliest. 3 News from Out and About. A 9-year-old Kenyan boy who made a wooden hand washing machine to help curb the spread of coronavirus. In his interview to BBC he told that he is very happy after receiving a presidential award. "I now have 2 machines and I want to make more," Stephen Wamukota said. They allow users to tip a bucket of water using a foot pedal to avoid touching surfaces to reduce infections. Stephen came up with the idea after learning on TV about ways to prevent catching the virus. Stephen and his family live in Mukwa village, Bungoma, Western Kenya, which has not reported a single case of the virus. His father James Wamukota, however, worries that it could still come to his area. "How was the machine made? I had bought some pieces of wood to make a window frame, but when I came back home after work one day, I found that Stephen had made the machine." Mr. Wamukota told the BBC. "The concept was Stephen's and I helped him in tightening the machine. I'm very proud," he said. Mr. Wamukota, who repairs electronic goods for living, said that his son has always been keen to learn his trade. He posted his son's invention on Facebook and was surprised how quickly it was shared across Poipal. Stephen was among 68 Kenyans given the Presidential Order of Service, Uzalendo, Patriotic, award on Monday. Stephen said that he wants to become an engineer and the county governor has promised to give him scholarship, Mr. Wamukota said. Researchers have analyzed the way paradise tree snakes glide through the air, and found that the way they wiggle is paramount to their aerial prowess. Through this observation, the researchers say, not only helps to explain how these snakes glide, but may also give insight into how to make robots do the same. And yes, that may mean at some point we get flying snake robots. CNN picked up on this slither in discovery, which was outlined in a paper recently and published in the journal Nature Physics. The paper, authored by Isaac J. Yeaton of Johns Hopkins University ETAL, notes that the way paradise tree snakes undulate is unique amongst the way other snakes undulate. And that this unique undulation is indeed key to their ability to cover significant horizontal distances once airborne. For those unfamiliar, paradise tree snakes aka Chrysopelia paradise are a species of snake found in Southeast Asia which can, like all member species of the genus Chrysopelia, glide. As their name suggests, paradise tree snakes love hanging out in trees, but they also love leaping from tree to tree or from tree to the ground. They're able to glide when leaping thanks to their bodies stretching out and flattening like ribbons, a feat they achieve by splaying their ribs. Yeaton and the other researchers found that, when it comes to the undulation part of the flying snake equation, the paradise tree snakes move to help themselves from keep rolling. The undulation, which not only occurs side to side, but also vertically, keeps them from tumbling and also helps to ensure they land upright. This means they have both a longer and safer flight. Yeaton notes that engineers could potentially transfer this aerial undulation over to snake robots to help them have a successful glide. Yeaton says, this could enable the robots to move on sand, swim, or navigate on other really rough environments. Which sounds both fascinating and like the beginning of an Anaconda/Terminator mashup movie. A 6-year-old boy is being hailed as a hero after he survived multiple dog bites while getting his younger sister out of harm's way. In an Instagram post shared by the boy's aunt, 6-year-old Bridger quite possibly saved his sister's life by standing in between her and a charging dog. Bridger's aunt, known as Nikki Walker, at Nicola Noel Walker, on Instagram says that he was bitten several times on the face and in the head. Walker says after he was bitten several times, he grabbed his sister's hand and ran with her to keep her safe. He later told his aunt, if someone had to die, I thought it should be me, according to the Instagram post. Bridger reportedly received more than 90 stitches and is back at home resting. A slew of data released yesterday showed promising signs of success for a trio of coronavirus vaccine candidates in their initial phases of study. The first, developed by Oxford University and AstraZeneca, was shown to prompt an immune response that lasted at least 2 months. The study was performed with a group of 1,000 patients with a larger study currently underway with tens of thousands enrolled. AstraZeneca has said that pending results, it could deliver emergency doses by year-end. The second, produced by Pfizer and BioNTech, also prompted an immune response in an early-stage study involving 60 healthy volunteers. The group is set to begin testing with 3,000 people this month. The third candidate, already approved for limited use by China, is a joint effort between CanSino and the Chinese military. New data showed the vaccine prompts an immune response but is less effective in patients 55 and older, a key target demographic for vaccination. All three demonstrated a dual immune response, producing both virus-neutralizing antibodies and T cells, which can facilitate antibody production as well as directly kill the virus. See an explanation of both here. More than 150 potential vaccines are in different stages of development around the world, with nearly 24 already being tested in humans. 4 are in late-stage trials. No matter how they may make you feel, licking your gadgets and electronics is never recommended. Unless you're a researcher from Meiji University in Japan who's invented what's being described as a taste display that can artificially recreate any flavor by triggering the 5 different tastes on a user's tongue. Years ago, it was thought that the tongue had different regions for tasting sweet, sour, salty, and bitter flavors where higher concentrations of taste buds tuned to specific flavors were found. We now know that the distribution is more evenly spread out across the tongue, and that a 5th flavor, umami, plays a big part in our enjoyment of food. Our better understanding of how the tongue works is crucial to a new prototype device that its creator, Homei Miyashita, calls the Norimaki synthesizer. It was inspired by how easily our eyes can be tricked into seeing something that technically doesn't exist. The screen you're looking at uses microscopic pixels made up of red, green, and blue elements that combine in varying intensities to create full-color images. Miyashita wondered if a similar approach could be used to trick the tongue, which is why their Norimaki synthesizer is also referred to as a taste display. There have been many attempts to artificially simulate tastes on the tongue with and without the presence of food, but they tend to focus on a specific taste or enhancing a single flavor, such as boosting how salty something tastes without actually having to add more salt. The Norimaki synthesizer takes a more aggressive approach through the use of 5 gels that trigger the 5 different tastes when they make contact with the human tongue. The color-coded gels made from agar formed in the shape of long tubes use glycine to create the taste of sweet, citric acid for acidic, sodium chloride for salty, magnesium chloride for bitter, and glutamic sodium for savory umami. When the device is pressed against the tongue, the user experiences all 5 tastes at the same time, but specific flavors are created by mixing those tastes in specific amounts and intensities like the RGB pixels on a screen. To accomplish this, the prototype is wrapped in copper foil so that when it's held in hand and touched to the surface of the tongue, it forms an electrical circuit through the human body, facilitating a technique known as electrophoresis. Electrophoresis is a process that moves molecules in a gel when an electrical current is applied, allowing them to be sorted by size based on the size of pores in the gel. But here the process simply causes the ingredients in the agar tubes to move away from the end touching the tongue, which reduces the tongue's ability to taste them. It's a subtractive process that selectively removes tastes to create a specific flavor profile. In testing, the Norimaki synthesizer has allowed users to experience the flavor of everything from gummy candy to sushi without having to place a single item of food in their mouths. In its current form, the prototype is a bit bulky, but it could be easily miniaturized to a device as compact as the VAPs everyone is already carrying around and regularly using. But instead of simulating the experience and flavors of smoking, it could recreate the satisfying feeling of eating a piece of chocolate or drinking a milkshake without having to ingest a single calorie. For in memoriam, Mr. Prasannakumar Pincha. The whole year of 2020 is turning out to be a disaster for the world. However, July 2020 has taken away all the smiles from the disability community. On July 26, 2020, the disability community mourned the sudden demise of one of its most lovable, honest, knowledgeable, and finest brains of the community. Mr. Prasannakumar Pincha breathed his last at the Max Super Specialty Hospital, drenching us in sadness. How ironic that it should happen on the same day that the American Disability Act had been passed 30 years earlier. He was a leader who fought for our rights and showed us the path towards inclusiveness, accessibility, and empowerment. A disability rights activist of a high caliber, Mr. Pincha was blind since birth. Shri Pincha was the former founder principal of the Government Institute for the Blind in Horhat, Assam, where he had rendered honorary services for some time before the institution was taken over by the government. Mr. Pincha also served as a former Joint Director of Social Welfare in the Government of Assam, former Regional Senior Manager of Action Aid, an international NGO, of the northeast of India, and a former Senior Manager cum National Team Leader looking after Action Aid's work on the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. He was also associated with the National Human Rights Commission as its Special Rapporteur, Persons with Disabilities, prior to taking charge as the Chief Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities. He also headed another statutory body, the National Trust for the Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation, and Multiple Disabilities as its chairperson. Thus, he is so far the only person with disability in the country to have headed two statutory bodies. In addition to championing the cause of the rights of persons with disabilities all his life, he also had a track record of working with the poor and the marginalized groups, more particularly during his association with ActionAid. Undeterred by his blindness, he had worked in the most difficult terrains of the northeastern region of the country with the poorest and the most marginalized communities. He became the first ever visually impaired Chief Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities and was Special Rapporteur with National Human Rights Commission and became a source of inspiration for all. In his tenure as a CCPD from December 28, 2011 to December 27, 2014, he was credited with many path-breaking judgment. His judicial expertise and his court case for banking rights for the blind is legendary. A law graduate and a master's degree holder in English, Mr. Pincha was well known for his legal and judicial advocacy. He was also the recipient of a National Award of Best Employee, Visually Disabled, in the year 1999 instituted by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India. His contribution to the disability sector was highly appreciated and recognized at the regional, national, and international levels. He never allowed his disability to come in the way to work for the benefit of persons with disabilities or the larger society. Be it the RPD Act 2016, issues of persons with disabilities, legal actions, or perfection in the use of English or Hindi languages, he was so stuffed with knowledge that one could always have been learning in his acquaintance. He was always available for all of us. His selection as the Chief Commissioner of Persons with Disabilities was based purely on merit. The entire community of persons with disabilities appreciated this decision of the government. The orders passed by him in his capacity as Chief Commissioner with Disabilities continues to have far-reaching and positive implications on the lives of persons with disabilities. He supported and mentored us to carry forward our mission at Radio Udon. We did 11 interviews with him, which was a big achievement for Radio Udon. Radio Udon and its listeners will feel the deep loss due to his untimely death. Yet he will always be alive in our hearts. He was so special, so important, and so honest that this loss can never be forgotten. May his soul rest in peace. Nisha Tale, Trustee, Udon Empowerment Trust. 5 phases of clinical trials. Note, the example provided is that of a cancer drug. However, the same process applies to COVID-19. Clinical trials are usually conducted in phases that build on one another. Each phase is designed to answer certain questions. Knowing the phase of the clinical trial is important because it can give you some idea about how much is known about the treatment being studied. There are pros and cons to taking part in each phase of a clinical trial. Although there are clinical trials for devices as well as other diseases and treatments, drugs for cancer patients are used in the examples of clinical trial phases described here. Phase 0 Clinical Trials. Exploring if and how a new drug may work. Even though Phase 0 studies are done in humans, this type of study isn't like the other phases of clinical trials. The purpose of this phase is to help speed up and streamline the drug approval process. Phase 0 studies are exploratory studies that often use only a few small doses of a new drug in a few patients. They might test whether the drug reaches the tumor, how the drug acts in the human body, and how cancer cells in the human body respond to the drug. The patients in these studies might need extra tests such as biopsies, scans and blood samples as part of the study process. The biggest difference between Phase 0 and the later phases of clinical trials is that there's almost no chance the volunteer will benefit by taking part in a Phase 0 trial. The benefit will be for other people in the future. Because drug doses are low, there's also less risk to the patient in Phase 0 studies compared to Phase I studies. Phase 0 studies help researchers find out whether the drugs do what they're expected to do. If there are problems with the way the drug is absorbed or acts in the body, this should become clear very quickly in a Phase 0 clinical trial. This process may help avoid the delay and expense of finding out years later in Phase 2 or even Phase 3 clinical trials that the drug doesn't act as expected to based on lab studies. Phase 0 studies aren't used widely and there are some drugs for which they wouldn't be helpful. Phase 0 studies are very small, often with fewer than 15 people, and the drug is given only for a short time. They're not a required part of testing a new drug. Phase I clinical trials. Is the treatment safe? Phase I studies of a new drug are usually the first that involve people. The main reason for doing Phase I studies is to find the highest dose of the new treatment that can be given safely without serious side effects. Although the treatment has been tested in lab and animal studies, the side effects in people can't always be predicted. These studies also help to decide on the best way to give the new treatment. Key points of Phase I clinical trials. The first few people in the study often get a very low dose of the treatment and are watched very closely. If there are only minor side effects, the next few participants may get a higher dose. This process continues until doctors find a dose that's most likely to work while having an acceptable level of side effects. The focus in Phase I is looking at what the drug does to the body and what the body does with the drug. Safety is the main concern at this point. Doctors keep a close eye on the people and watch for any serious side effects. Because of the small numbers of people in Phase I studies, rare side effects may not be seen until later. Placebos, sham or inactive treatments, are not part of Phase I trials. These studies usually include a small number of people, typically up to a few dozen. Often, people with different types of cancer can take part in the same Phase I study. These studies are usually done in major cancer centers. These studies are not designed to find out if the new treatment works against cancer. Overall, Phase I trials are the ones with the most potential risk. But Phase I studies do help some patients. For those with life-threatening illnesses, weighing the potential risks and benefits carefully is key. Phase 2 clinical trials. Does the treatment work? If a new treatment is found to be reasonably safe in Phase I clinical trials, it can then be tested in a Phase 2 clinical trial to find out if it works. The type of benefit or response the doctors look for depends on the goal of the treatment. It may mean the cancer shrinks or disappears. Or it might mean there's an extended period of time where the cancer doesn't get any bigger, or there's a longer time before the cancer comes back. In some studies, the benefit may be an improved quality of life. Many studies look to see if people getting the new treatment live longer than they would have been expected to without the treatment. Key points of Phase 2 clinical trials. Usually, a group of 25 to 100 patients with the same type of cancer get the new treatment in a Phase 2 study. They're treated using the dose and method found to be the safest and most effective in Phase I studies. In a Phase 2 clinical trial, all the volunteers usually get the same dose. But some Phase 2 studies randomly assign participants to different treatment groups, much like what's done in Phase 3 trials. These groups may get different doses or get the treatment in different ways to see which provides the best balance of safety and effectiveness. No placebo, sham or inactive treatments, is used. Phase 2 studies are often done at major cancer centers, but may also be done in community hospitals or even doctors' offices. Larger number of patients get the treatment in Phase 2 studies, so there's a better chance that less common side effects may be seen. If enough patients benefit from the treatment and the side effects aren't too bad, the treatment is allowed to go on to a Phase 3 clinical trial. Along with watching for responses, the research team keeps looking for any side effects. Phase 3 clinical trials. Is it better than what's already available? Treatments that have been shown to work in Phase 2 studies usually must succeed in one more phase of testing before they're approved for general use. Phase 3 clinical trials compare the safety and effectiveness of the new treatment against the current standard treatment. Because doctors do not yet know which treatment is better, study participants are often picked at random, called randomized, to get either the standard treatment or the new treatment. When possible, neither the doctor nor the patient knows which of the treatments the patient is getting. This type of study is called a double-blind study. Randomization and blinding are discussed in more detail later. Key points of Phase 3 clinical trials. Most Phase 3 clinical trials have a large number of patients, at least several hundred. These studies are often done in many places across the country, or even around the world, at the same time. Phase 3 clinical trials are more likely to be offered by community-based oncologists. These studies tend to last longer than Phase I and II studies. Placebos may be used in some Phase 3 studies, but they're never used alone if there's a treatment available that works. As with other studies, patients in Phase 3 clinical trials are watched closely for side effects and treatment is stopped if they're too bad. Submission for FDA approval. New Drug Application, NDA. In the United States, when Phase 3 clinical trials, or sometimes Phase 2 studies, show a new drug is more effective and/or safer than the current standard treatment, a new drug application, NDA, is submitted to the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, for approval. The FDA then reviews the results from the clinical trials and other relevant information. Based on the review, the FDA decides whether to approve the treatment for use in patients with the type of illness the drug was tested on. If approved, the new treatment often becomes a standard of care and newer drugs must often be tested against it before being approved. If the FDA feels that more evidence is needed to show that the new treatment's benefits outweigh its risks, it may ask for more information or even require that more studies be done. Phase 4 clinical trials. What else do we need to know? Drugs approved by the FDA are often watched over a long period of time in Phase 4 studies. Even after testing a new medicine on thousands of people, the full effects of the treatment may not be known. Some questions may still need to be answered. For example, a drug may get FDA approval because it was shown to reduce the risk of cancer coming back after treatment. But does this mean that those who get it are more likely to live longer? Are there rare side effects that haven't been seen yet or side effects that only show up after a person has taken the drug for a long time? These types of questions may take many more years to answer and are often addressed in Phase 4 clinical trials. Key points of Phase 4 clinical trials. Phase 4 studies look at drugs that have already been approved by the FDA. The drugs are available for doctors to prescribe for patients, but Phase 4 studies might still be needed to answer important questions. These studies may involve thousands of people. This is typically the safest type of clinical trial because the treatment has already been studied a lot and might have already been used in many people. Phase 4 studies look at safety over time. These studies may also look at other aspects of the treatment, such as quality of life or cost effectiveness. You can get the drugs used in a Phase 4 trial without enrolling in a study. And the care you would get in a Phase 4 study is very much like the care you could expect if you were to get the treatment outside of a clinical trial. But in Phase 4 studies you are helping researchers learn more about the treatment and doing a service to future patients. The American Cancer Society Medical and Editorial Content Team. 6A record conjoined twins. The boy's mother from Beaver Creek, Ohio wasn't expecting twins. And she certainly wasn't expecting conjoined, previously often called Siamese, twins. They were joined at the torso, facing each other. As they shared several organs, doctors determined it was unlikely both would survive if they were separated, so their parents refused any attempts. With 9 children in the family, Father Wesley Gallion needed a better income to support them all, so the Gallion took Ronnie and Donnie on the road by the time they were 4 years old to perform at circus side shows across the US and Canada. Most loved the cute lively boys, rather than consider them freaks, and they made enough money to support the entire family. Their younger brother Jim recalled some of the stupid questions he'd hear. "They're twins, aren't they, or y'all born that way? Y'all brothers?" With a laugh, Jim called such questions fascinating, noting that sometimes his brothers would be laughed at and other times strangers would pay for their meals at restaurants. "You see the warmest of hearts and you see the coldest of hearts," Jim said, and a little bit in between. Sideshow acts became taboo in the 1970s, so to make a living Ronnie and Donnie traveled to Central and South America, and were featured by circuses there. "They were treated totally different down there," Jim said. "They were treated like rock stars. About 75% of conjoined twins born alive are female, so Siamese boys were an even greater sideshow attraction." Ronnie and Donnie retired from sideshows at 39, but still made occasional appearances, such as on The Jerry Springer Show in 1997 and a 1998 documentary on Discovery Channel. They lived in a house in Dayton purchased with their earnings. "We've had a nice life," Donnie said. "And they were healthy." In 2014 they became the oldest surviving conjoined twins in recorded history, surpassing Chong and Eng Bunker, born in Thailand in 1811. At the time, the country was known as Siam. They were also sideshow performers and billed as Siamese twins. That's where that term came from. The Bunkers retired in North Carolina and lived for a total of 62 years 251 days. As they approached the Bunkers record, Donnie and Ronnie would mark the day off on a calendar. But there was another contender. Giacomo and Giovanni Battista Tocchi, born in Italy on an unknown date in 1875, were thought to have lived 63 years. Ronnie, pointing at his abdomen, said, "When Jim was a little boy, he sat there where we're joined it." The twins and Jim developed a close bond early on. In 2009, Ronnie developed a lung infection which obviously threatened both of their lives. Once recovered, Jim and his wife Mary insisted Ronnie and Donnie come to live with them, sparking another documentary. "That's kind of giving it back right now," Jim said in 2014. "I don't do it because of that, but I feel that way. They paid for us all growing up. They were the breadwinners. The schools where they grew up refused to educate the twins, they would be too distracting," school officials said. Ronnie and Donnie died in a Dayton hospice on July 4, this year at 68 years 250 days old, firmly setting the record for the oldest conjoined twins ever. 7. My employment journey being autistic. What is autism? We don't hire people with autism. That was the answer I got from many companies in India while I was searching for a place of employment. My name is Asha Speeder and this is my story of how I came to be in SAP Labs, India. I did my schooling and college in the US, where I graduated with a degree in office administration with a medical administrative assistant specialization. I worked many jobs in hospitals and clinics but had a hard time maintaining employment due to intensive customer service and multitasking. In my previous job, my manager had suggested me to start pursuing a new career in the IT field as a software tester since she observed that I am good with computers and also display good attention to detail skills. I came to India in April 2014. When I first started interviewing for a job, many companies didn't know what autism was, and they were hesitant to continue the conversation and learn about the condition. Every time I made the attempt to explain and give more information about autism, I found these companies were showing little interest and no empathy. After completing the software testing course and internship from an institute in Bangalore, I started searching for software testing jobs in different companies by making trips to the offices and even by calling them over the phone. It was extremely difficult as companies again didn't know what autism was and told me that I needed a college degree in computer science along with other skills like programming languages, Java, Python, .NET, etc., in order to get a job. Not only that, it was also very competitive to get a job in this industry as there was already a large pool of candidates who had more qualifications and skills than me. I felt like giving up and moving back to the US. In the end, I got to know that there was a non-profit organization called Enable India which helps people with disabilities by giving them training and providing employment. After explaining the situation to my aunt, she did a lot of research and found some organizations which helped people with autism like Prize and Enable India. Enable India had signed up with SAP just then for the Autism at Work employment program. We reached out to Enable India. They guided me on the needed paperwork. After that, we went to Nimans and sat with a psychiatrist for some evaluations, tests, assessments, etc. I got a certificate from the doctor stating that I have autism spectrum disorder. As Enable India were the training partners for the SAP Autism at Work program, the employability training which started in March 2015 saw us attending trainings both at Enable India and the SAP offices. It was fun, and I was the only girl with 10 other boys. We were like a family and used to laugh, joke around, and play pranks on each other. The training consisted of typing drills, breathing exercises, games, role simulation activities, software training courses, being a task manager of specific roles like attendance, events, discipline, etc. Enable India also organized arts session activities and games with trainers from Snehadhara Foundation. We also participated in trainings like robotics, learning software, and job shadowing in a department for 3 days. On weekends, we used to go for volunteer work and other different activities like walk-a-thon, cricket game, trekking, etc. We used to have performance evaluation every week with our trainers at Enable India to see how we were doing in the training and receive feedback for improvements. I learned many skills in the employability training like teamwork, communication, prioritizing work, dressing up professionally, noting down learning/tasks every day, giving speeches and speaking in front of the candidates and trainers, keeping track of attendance, noting down the timings of how many minutes/hours the candidates came late for the training and whether they informed me of their tardiness and absence by text message, and turning in assignments on the due date. The training has changed me completely by giving me confidence, good communication skills, professional behavior, teamwork skills, and being open to asking questions whenever I don't understand something. I completed the training in July 2015 and was one of the first candidates to be placed in SAP labs in Bangalore, India. After joining SAP, the trainers from Enable India gave a sensitization session, which focused on basic understanding of autism and how to work with people who have autism, to my teammates and manager. I also created a self-advocacy PPT about myself and presented it to them. My manager and some of the team members were all shocked to learn that I have autism and other teammates didn't know about autism, since they were hearing about it for the first time. The trainers and professionals from Enable India had set up the Inclusion Center at SAP till 2017. They would visit SAP twice a week for 2 years to review performance and inclusion, provide counseling and support to employees with autism along with their mentor and managers. Gradually, the Inclusion Center's ownership was transitioned to SAP itself. My employment journey started at SAP, where I work currently as a quality associate. My mentor and teammates first gave me an overview of the project by watching some videos to understand how the industry functions and works. After that, they asked me to practice testing the sections for functionality defects and raise defects using a tool. There used to be meetings with the manager regarding my job performance and feedback from the colleagues about my testing skills. I have been receiving job promotions from 2016 to date, and I am moving up to a different testing level and also learning new skills. My job contributes to ensuring that the product is stable and tested thoroughly without defects. My manager, mentor, and teammates are very amiable, understanding, concerned, encouraging, and supportive of me. They always meet up with me and check to see if I have any problems with work and offer support from their side. They always include me in team lunches and events. I always receive appreciation for my work. In the wake of the lockdown due to COVID-19 pandemic, we have online meetings as an integral part of work from home. Once, when I had a meeting with my manager on April 2nd, I told him that it was World Autism Awareness Day and month. He arranged for a team meeting online and asked me along with my teammates to dress in blue. He asked my teammates to guess why we had to wear blue. Only one colleague guessed correctly that it was World Autism Awareness Month and started talking about it. My experience with SAP so far has been wonderful, and I always look forward to attending office each day. I enjoy working with my teammates and learning new things as well. During office hours, I like to help out and participate in many autism events within SAP where I give speeches and host events. I, sometimes, go out with the Autism at Work team to different organizations during office hours and see what they do and also give speeches about my life with autism and my work life at SAP Labs. I am also part of the Autism at Work yoga program where I practice yoga with a trainer and other candidates thrice a week. On weekends, I like to visit many organizations with my mother to give speeches to parents with autistic children about my life with autism. We also give them some tips and advice when they ask me questions about what to do with their children. I am one of the advisory board members at EKA Educational and Charitable Trust. It aims at empowering young adults with special needs by providing appropriate training and placements for jobs. I am also a member of the Rotary Club in Bangalore where I go and help out with volunteer activities on weekends. Diversity and inclusion are important for any organization. Companies need to take an initiative to get educated about hiring people with autism and focus on what they can bring to the table like their skills, strengths, talents, etc. If the candidate is not suitable for a job at the company, they can be guided on where to go and what steps to take in order not to feel bad and left out. After candidates get hired for a job at the company, the supervisor/manager should hold monthly meetings with them to check how their work is going and offer help or support if they have problems. If the job is not working out after their probation, the manager and organization can work with the employee to transition them to another department, based on their skills and interests. In order to improve social interactions, they can meet for team lunches every month. The company can organize autism events every year and invite everyone to come and learn about autism. They can create and provide opportunities to employees with autism to participate in extracurricular activities in the workplace. I was encouraged to host the Autism Summit event in SAP in November 2018. SAP is a role model and is leading this way by hiring people with autism and gives them a chance to participate in many autism events where the candidates can give speeches about their life and also about what they do at the company. The Autism at Work trainers at SAP hold monthly meetings with us to see how our work is going and whether we need any help or support from their side if we have problems. We also meet for team lunches often. Today, I am proud to work for SAP Labs and hope to continue doing so in the future. Asha Speeder, 8. The best lesson of my life. As Helen Keller has said, the best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched, they must be felt with the heart. Reading in Braille also gives us such a thrill and hearty feeling. I am Chandana Chandrasekhar, a commerce graduate. Currently working as an associate in a corporate company since last 4 years. I am totally blind and partially hearing impaired. During my final year of college, I got selected through campus recruitment. And since then I have been working. Accounts and finance are the two most favorite subjects of mine. You all might be wondering how a blind person can pursue studies in accounts. Yes, it is possible. Blindness is not a barrier to study the subject of your interest. Braille, as we all know, is the dotted form of alphabets and it is experienced through the sense of touch. We, blind persons, experience a joyous feeling when we read through Braille. I was born with RP. And when I was a kid, I had partial vision. I used to read notes that were written in large print and in dark sketch pens by my mom. I was studying in ICSE integrated school and my syllabus increased year by year. As the years passed by, my vision deteriorated gradually and it was not possible to read large print anymore. During that time, my parents used to sit for hours together and would read everything for me. I never thought I could read independently through Braille. As for how I learned Braille, I would like to consider it the best turning point of my life. It was in class 7 when a piano teacher, Ms. Ruby, visited our school to teach us music. And that was when the concept of Braille was strongly imposed on me. On the first day of class, when my teacher realized that I could not read large print, she proposed the idea of teaching me Braille. I am forever grateful to her for bringing me into the world of literacy. According to me, every blind person is literate if they are able to read and write Braille. In a short span of time, I learned Braille along with many contractions. And indeed, it was a great and proud feeling for my mom when I started to write and read my notes on my own. Contractions help you to read faster, and that's why I love reading in Braille. My parents used to scan the textbooks and get them converted into Braille so that I could study and do better in my career. Therefore, I would unhesitatingly state that learning Braille was the best part of my life. Chundana Chandrasekhar can be reached at chundanachannews7@gmail.com. 9 Potluck at Paradise Shanty. Loud, uproarious laughter floated up from the party hall below to their second-floor window. Looks like a party, Riddhi remarked to her husband. Rakesh looked up from the document he was perusing. It looked like a get-together of sorts when I was parking the car in the evening. I saw some of the men from the first, second, and third floors arranging chairs and setting up potluck. Riddhi turned away from the window with a sudden jerk. Paradise Shanty. How the name had appealed to her imagination. She had dreamed of making friends with her new neighbors, of being part of the group. But it was the same even here. No one willing to come forward and befriend with her, or at least to get to know her. The same judgments, the same wariness and the same distancing had followed her here also. People seeing her and moving out of the way but not saying even a single hello. Chatting, laughing groups quietening and moving aside as she approached, and conversations resuming after she had crossed them. People greeting her husband and ignoring her. Meeting couples during evening walks and the men talking to her husband while their wives stood mutely by and not attempting to make conversation with her. She had hoped that at least people at her own age would include her in their circle. But then, only now after almost 6 months of moving in, she had learned about the community's WhatsApp group and had asked to be added. Oh, her neighbor had said with a note of surprise, "You would like to join the WhatsApp group? How sweet! I will give your number to the group admin." But she had not yet been added. Sometimes it drove her to agitation. What did they know about her? About her skills and her achievements? About her academic greatness? Or her professional stature? About how she was loved and respected in a world they did not know? To them she was just a blind woman. A blind woman who carefully negotiated her way around the community by tapping her white cane. What if you approached them instead? Rakesh had ventured when she had vented her frustration to him initially. But how would she know where the people were when they did not speak to her? When they silently moved aside and let her pass without making a single sound? When she did not know who lived in which house? The clinking of the cutlery now indicated that the dinner was in progress. A potluck that her neighbors had decided that she would not be able to attend because she was blind. Her socializing, party-loving soul felt very lonely. She could only pull the window shut and start some music. Anandi Vishwanathan is a visually impaired researcher, blogger, and a communications professional. She is also mother to a 4-year-old tempest who keeps her on her toes. Anandi can be reached at inbox.anandhi@gmail.com. 10 A Ballad of Ineffable Love. A Sonnet. When I call others, your name comes out. And watching own death while crossing the road. You arrive on lips, in my save me shout. with the bloody tears in this doting mode. I love not your aesthetic appearance but your soul. Lovers say that they can die but I want to live for you. To lend my eyes for your tears and alleviate your soul. And that's how my dear I love you. I want to fill roses in your path to make your life, a personification of bliss. A hug of comfort and a soothing kiss. If you still believe that love and care are the dagger keys. Then also, may God fill your life with exuberance ineffable, it is my heartiest wish. Still, if you don't really want this fate to make, then oh, Messiah, you can have this poor heart to break. Cynthia Singh. 11. How Carlos Ghosn escaped Japan. According to the ex-Green Beret who snuck him out. By Mei Zhang. In the spring of last year, a former Green Beret named Michael Taylor was in between jobs when he received a call from an old friend. "Hey, we got a guy," said the friend, a Lebanese businessman. "He's close to us. He's getting railroaded over in Japan. Is there something you can help us with?" Ali, the pseudonym Taylor gave him, wouldn't provide any more specifics, not even a name. "It's possible," Taylor told his friend. "But he would need a lot more information." The call wasn't that unusual. Taylor had once run American International Security Corporation, a private military contractor specializing in risk assessment and in spiriting people out of complex situations. Over 2 decades, he had established a reputation in certain circles for dramatic recovery missions conducted all over the world. Most were unofficial referrals from the FBI or the State Department, a young girl abducted by her Lebanese father amid a custody dispute, or a teenager who had gotten into a car accident over spring break in Costa Rica and was facing jail time. During his career, he has completed nearly 24 such operations, charging clients anywhere from $2,000 to $2 million per job. The missions, some of which took years to plan and execute, earned Taylor the nickname Captain America. He lived in a binary world populated by, as he saw it, patriots or traitors, our guy or the bad guy. True to superhero style, the tales Taylor recounts from this career are outsize, epic, including the escape of Carlos Ghosn. Back in 2004, while providing security for U.S. investigators in Baghdad building war crimes cases against Saddam Hussein, Taylor had been introduced to a Lebanese businessman named Ali, the friend of a friend. Ali had hit on the idea of selling insurance in wartime Iraq automobile, business, life, and needed an escort. Taylor mobilized a caravan of Chevy Suburbans, picked Ali up once he had landed, raced him along the Baghdad airport road, arguably the most dangerous 7 miles of highway in the world at the time, and dropped him off behind the fortified blast walls and concrete barricades of the Green Zone. Now, calling from Beirut, Ali piled on the questions. How would the operation work? How much would it cost? Taylor told Ali he didn't know. Sneaking someone out of Japan, a populated, tightly run island nation, not a failing state, he hadn't done that before. This isn't something we've seen on TV, Taylor told him. This isn't Hollywood. Taylor decided to do some research. It didn't take him long to figure out the man in question. The next day, Taylor called Ali back. Was it Carlos Ghosn, the former CEO of Nissan, under house arrest in Tokyo? Ali confirmed. This is going to be a major event, Taylor remembers telling him. If Taylor, now 59, had known that saying yes would result in his arrest, the arrest of his son Peter, and the possibility of their own extradition to Japan in a headline news case involving the Tokyo Prosecutor's Office, the U.S. State Department, the Department of Justice's Office of International Affairs, the U.S. Marshals Service's Special Operations Group, the Massachusetts Federal Court, a Mississippi senator, and the White House, he may not have picked up the phone, never mind recounted the escape for this magazine. The rich are not accustomed to having their freedom curtailed. International mobility is among the primary markers of privilege. As the jet-setting chairman of three car companies Nissan, Mitsubishi, and Renault, Carlos Ghosn, the Arabic pronunciation is Ghosn, had homes in Rio, Beirut, Paris, and Amsterdam. Now, after being in Japanese custody for 4 months, his world had been reduced to his house in Tokyo, where he was awaiting trial on charges of embezzlement. 3 surveillance cameras were affixed to his front door and 2 of his passports, Brazilian and Lebanese, had been taken from him, locked away at his attorney's office. Violating the terms of his house arrest would cost him $9 million in bail money. Ghosn stood accused of a staggering range of financial crimes, including underreporting $80 million in earnings over an 8-year period, shifting more than $16 million in personal losses onto company books, and using an elaborate chain of shell companies to bill Nissan for his lavish lifestyle. His mansion in Beirut, according to Nissan, had been purchased and renovated with nearly $15 million in company funds. Ghosn meanwhile insisted that the charges against him were part of a corporate plot aided by Japanese authorities, to oust him from Nissan. "The only comment I will make is that Mr. Ghosn has been claiming from the moment he was arrested that he is innocent of all the charges brought against him," was how a spokesperson, Leslie Young Eisenwater, responded to a list of questions from Vanity Fair. Ghosn's friends back in Lebanon were worried about him. Confined to his house day after day, allowed out only to lunch at the nearby Grand Hyatt or to visit his lawyer, he began to despair. The case against him, he learned, could take years to work its way through the Japanese courts, meaning he might remain under house arrest indefinitely. "I might die here," one friend recalls him saying. His hope was almost out. He was barely eating and had stopped exercising when he received a call from Ali, who knew Ghosn's wife, Carol. Ali told Ghosn about a guy he used to know in Baghdad who specialized in recovery missions. Would Ghosn be interested? By all means. Ali connected Taylor with Carol, whom Ghosn, now 66, had married in 2016. That year, the couple had thrown an extravagant Marie Antoinette-themed party at Versailles, complete with vintage wine from their private vineyard, a 4-foot pyramid of pâte à choux and costumed actors in powdered pompadour wigs. "We wanted it to feel as if we were inviting guests into our home," Carol told Town and Country. Nothing too studied. Taylor flew to Beirut, where he met Carol at a mansion in the historic Akrafi neighborhood. They spoke for hours. Carol told Taylor that Ghosn had been treated like a pal. During her husband's detention, she told Taylor, the lights in his tiny cell had been kept on 24/7 and he was allowed out for only half an hour each day. He was subjected to interrogations that lasted as long as 8 hours and didn't have a bed. His jailers had provided him with a straw tatami mat, customary bedding in Japan. The charges against him, she told Taylor, were bogus, brought by Japanese officials who wanted to prevent Ghosn from engineering a closer merger with Renault, the French automaker. "They don't like foreigners," Carol said of the Japanese. Taylor flew home to Massachusetts feeling equal parts skeptical and intrigued. Later, he was shocked by what he read about Japan's criminal justice system, which a United Nations Committee on Torture has denounced as medieval. Suspects are often denied access to lawyers, and can be imprisoned and questioned for lengthy periods without being charged, a system known as hostage justice. Japan, a country that has low crime rates, nevertheless has a conviction rate of 99.4% higher than North Korea. Taylor came to believe that Ghosn was a victim. "I felt he was a hostage," Taylor says. "He was being tortured. Then I had empathy for the guy." Taylor himself had felt wronged by the criminal justice system, and not just once in his life. In 1984, while he was working in Beirut after leaving the Special Forces, a woman accused him of raping her, resulting in a criminal charge and an arrest. The charge was dropped after colleagues testified that Taylor had been abroad at the time of the alleged assault. In 1998, while working as a private investigator, Taylor pled guilty to planting drugs in a woman's car. He doesn't deny that it happened but claims he took the fall for one of his employees, who planted the drugs in order to help Taylor's client wrest custody of his children from their irresponsible mother. Then came the crucible. In 2007, an old friend from his Special Forces days who was working in Afghanistan invited Taylor to apply for a Pentagon contract to train the Afghan soldiers that were fighting the Taliban. Taylor, by then running his own security company, submitted the winning bid. $54 million over 5 years. One day in 2012, 2 months after the Afghanistan contract ended, Taylor was on a mission for the Drug Enforcement Administration. $3 billion in gold bars that had once belonged to Muammar Gaddafi, the former Libyan dictator, were being sold off to Hezbollah. Taylor was tasked with intercepting the gold bars at sea, en route to Syria. Before he could complete the mission, however, he was summoned home and charged with procurement fraud, among other charges. According to federal prosecutors, Taylor had received privileged information about the Pentagon contract from his former Special Forces buddy, whom Taylor had allegedly rewarded with kickbacks. Deemed a flight risk, Taylor was denied bail and spent 14 months in a state prison in Utah awaiting trial. Running out of money and unable to pay his lawyer, he decided to plead guilty to 2 of the charges. He served nearly 19 months. The experience left Taylor with a deep mistrust of government. "I was forced to plead guilty and swear under oath that I did something I didn't do," he says. "I don't think I got a fair shake and it changed my whole life. It destroyed a business I worked for 17 years. Taylor saw Gossen's plight through the prism of his own experience in Utah. A wronged man imperiled by an unjust system, confined, hopeless, ruined. Not long after Taylor returned home from meeting with Carol Gossen in Beirut, he called Ali. "I'll do it." In many ways, Taylor was uniquely suited for the Gossen mission. His tenure in the Special Forces, one of the most elite and unconventional branches of the U.S. military, familiarized him with Lebanon, and he had strong ties to the country and its people. He had cultivated an extensive network of former operatives who specialized in everything from munitions to transportation. Getting Gossen out of Japan seemed a far-fetched task, but Taylor felt he had a 100% chance of pulling it off, he told me. "I wouldn't have agreed to it if I didn't think it was 100%. Taylor was born Michael Anderson in Arizona in 1960. His father, who was half Cherokee, left the family not long after, and Michael's mother, Betty, who was also half Cherokee, gave him her maiden name, Gemrose. He grew up in a cinder block hut with plywood for a roof and slept on a cot next to his brother and sister. His mother worked as a cocktail waitress at a local bar where she met Robert Taylor, a military intelligence officer who wooed her with his Sunbeam fastback. They soon married, and Taylor formally adopted the Gemrose children before moving the family to Ethiopia. Michael Taylor went from living in abject poverty to experiencing the might of the American military at the height of the Vietnam War. "We got basketball, a swimming pool, baseball," he recalls. "It was like, wow, this is paradise." When the family moved to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, Taylor became co-captain of the high school football team and was voted most likely to succeed. He would spend 6 hours a day at the weight room on base, where he met Special Forces soldiers who got him thinking about a career not just in the military, but in its most prestigious ranks. At the time, the Army was running an experiment, recruiting minors to Special Forces straight from high school. The program didn't last long because of a high attrition rate. But in 1978, Taylor was among its 169 recruits. According to him, by the time they graduated from the Special Forces qualification course, only 3 men remained. John Carl, who now works in the Los Angeles Police Department. Gary Gordon, who died in the downed Black Hawk helicopter in Somalia in 1993. And Taylor. Taylor joined the 10th Special Forces Group in Europe, where he was trained to perform high-altitude parachute jumps, free-falling 5 miles before releasing his parachute just 2,000 feet from the ground. He served as a demolitions expert on a secret team assembled to deploy portable nuclear devices in the event of a Soviet invasion. In 1982, his unit was the first to be deployed to Lebanon during the civil war there. Taylor studied Arabic, developed extensive ties and met his wife. The couple settled in Massachusetts, where Taylor adjusted to life as a suburban dad. Not long after he set up shop as a private military contractor, a federal task force hired him to go undercover to infiltrate a Lebanese crime ring. Taylor discovered that the group, working out of Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, was behind a global drug smuggling operation. Thanks in part to his work, U.S. authorities were able to impound $100 million of hashish that was shipped to Boston in blue plastic olive barrels at the time, the largest drug seizure in history. Taylor was paid $3.3500 for his work, mostly in $100 bills. In 1997, Taylor was standing on top of the George Washington Bridge, conducting a risk assessment for the Port Authority, when an FBI agent who had heard about the drug bust called about an American woman needing help. Her ex-husband had kidnapped their daughter and fled to Lebanon. The FBI couldn't do anything because the United States did not have diplomatic relations with Lebanon at the time. Taylor retrieved the girl, and the mission was featured in a high-profile spot on 2020's. More requests for rescues came in. I would get a phone call. "Hey, I got your number, I can't tell you where," Taylor recalls. 5 minutes before, I would have had a call from the FBI saying, "Heads up." That's when the call from Ali came through. Taylor didn't agree to the Gosen job because he missed the thrill. He claims he had enough thrills to last him 1,000 lifetimes. It was a sense of public service, of being guided by a mission. Ali let Gosen know the plan was a go. Buoyed by the news, Gosen began eating again and started working out 3 times a week, preparing for his future as an international fugitive. Taylor called his attorney and other legal experts and asked whether helping someone in Japan jump bail would violate any U.S. laws. Assured that it wouldn't, he set out to determine how he might keep his word. Taylor knew from Carol that Gosen wasn't required to wear ankle monito, and that he had been permitted to keep his French passport. But in addition to the surveillance cameras over his doorway, Gosen was also being monitored by 2 plainclothes detectives hired by Nissan. There are only 2 ways out of Japan: by air or by sea. Escaping by sea requires sailing down the coast of Japan and crossing 2,600 miles of open water to Thailand, where Gosen would still need to get on a plane to return to Lebanon. The journey would take 2 to 3 weeks, which struck Taylor as a risky undertaking for a man of Gosen's age and constitution. That left the sky. Gosen, who was a household name in Japan, couldn't fly commercial, so Taylor would need a private jet. Taylor knew from experience that the biggest enemies on any rescue mission are the captives themselves and their families. Once they know you are going to help them, he says, they start telling you how to do things. First Gosen insisted on going by boat. Then he wanted to fly out of Tokyo. Then he demanded he leave immediately. There was constant tension according to Taylor, and it took enormous discipline to remain committed to his original vision. Throughout that fall, Taylor assembled a team of operatives with varying talents. Maritime operations, airport security, IT, police, counter-surveillance. It was like casting a heist movie, each man indispensable for his skill set. Most were ex-special forces, guys Taylor had known for 40 years or more. They had spent their lives operating in a world where people were contacts, groups of people were cells, and information was intelligence. Those who hadn't met in the military had crossed paths in their civilian lives, skydiving at the local airstrip or moonlighting as coaches on the high school football field. The men had been trained to be fighters, and now that the war on terror was ostensibly over, there was nothing left to fight for. Taylor's cobbled-together ranks embodied a central Marxist concept, the Reserve Army of Labor, and Taylor was in a position to put them to work. The first call Taylor made was to a military officer in the Middle East who had retired into the business of gem appraisal. He would be Taylor's deputy. Taylor also called a man he had been in combat with in Iraq who now provided private security. That man, well connected in Asia, assembled dossiers on everyone involved in the operation. Gosen, his colleagues, his wife, and the managers of every airport terminal that might provide an avenue of escape. And then the jet. Taylor needed to find a charter company that wouldn't ask too many questions. His men began calling outfits all over the world, feeling them out. Could they handle a passenger who required a high level of discretion? Could the transaction remain off the books? Every place they called failed the test. Then they heard about a Turkish company rumored to have flown gold out of Venezuela in violation of U.S. sanctions. Look, Taylor's men explained, we got to pull out a VIP who does not want to be noticed. They don't want to be on the manifest. We are used to doing this, came the reply. What do you need? With the flight option secured, Taylor got to thinking about how he could smuggle a person across international borders undetected. Eventually, he says, you get to a box. The box would have to be big enough to contain Gosen and heavy enough to account for his weight. Taylor had one of his men measure the door to the cargo hold on the charter plane. Then he had a staging company in Beirut build 2 black plywood boxes with reinforced corners, the kind used to store and transport loudspeakers. He stipulated that the boxes be a centimeter narrower than the cargo door on the jet, so they could be loaded without issue. He had casters affixed for easy maneuvering and holes drilled in the bottom so Gosen could breathe. Gosen weighed 165 pounds. He would be taking the place of subwoofers in one of the boxes, and those weigh about 110 pounds. Close enough, Taylor thought. Finally, there was the question of timing. Taylor wanted to get Gosen out in time for Christmas. But by the time all the preparations were in place, the jet wasn't available. Then, when the jet was free again, Gosen had to attend a court hearing. A few days before Christmas, Taylor was on the tarmac at an airport in the Middle East, ready to depart for Japan, when he learned that the pilots had not been fully briefed. He called off the operation minutes before the flight was set to take off. Taylor had meanwhile learned that the surveillance cameras at Gosen's apartment were kept on at all times, but it wasn't a live feed. The footage was only collected once a week, on Mondays, Tuesdays, or Wednesdays. If Gosen could be evacuated on a Thursday or a Friday, the authorities might not realize he was missing until the following week. On Tuesday, December 24, Gosen was granted a 1-hour phone call with Carol. On Christmas Day, Gosen attended a pre-trial hearing. Thursday came and went. Then around midnight on Friday, a call came through on the unregistered cell phone that had been smuggled to him. It was Taylor. He said simply, "I'll see you tomorrow." Saturday morning, Taylor arrived at Dubai International Airport. With him was George Zayuk, a former member of the Lebanese militia who advertised himself as an expert in war, weapons, and hostile lands. The jet was delayed. The client before them was running late and the Bombardier Global Express didn't lift off until 10:16 a.m., 90 minutes behind schedule, destined for Kansai International Airport in Osaka. Taylor's team had studied 5 airports near Tokyo, and Kansai International had revealed a crucial flaw: the terminal did not have scanners big enough to accommodate cargo the size of, say, a subwoofer. Only one of the 2 Turkish pilots had been briefed on the mission. Taylor ran through the master plan throughout the flight. It's always a big deal when you are saving someone's life, or the future of their life, he says. But from an operational perspective, this one didn't get me any more jacked up than others. The jet landed in Osaka at 10:30 a.m. local time on December 29. Taylor knew from his research that airport security would be nearing the end of their long shifts and thus less alert. The two speaker boxes were loaded into the back of a waiting van, which dropped Taylor and Zayak off at the Stargate Hotel near the airport. There they changed into warmer clothes and boarded a bullet train to Tokyo. On the train, Taylor's phone began an unexpected automatic software update. "The first thing I thought was, I wonder if the NSA knows," he recalls. "I wouldn't put anything past them." The update meant that Taylor wouldn't be able to access any of the apps he needed to be in contact with other members of the team while the mission was underway. Meanwhile in Tokyo, Gosen left his house at 2:30 in the afternoon, wearing a toque and the surgical mask that was common across Asia long before COVID-19. He walked the half-mile to the Grand Hyatt. The hotel had been selected for its many egresses, and for the fact that Gosen frequented it for lunches. Going there wouldn't be a deviation from his ordinary routine. "This crucial juncture is where accounts Taylor's to me. The prosecutors to the court deviate." In Taylor's telling, Gosen stood by a pillar in the lobby near the exit and waited, as per earlier instructions. Before long, a man Taylor approached him. They shook hands. "It's time to go home," Taylor told Gosen. But according to court documents that were filed later in Massachusetts federal court, Gosen headed upstairs instead. There in room 933, which had been booked under Taylor's son Peter's name, Gosen changed into a new set of clothes. An hour later, Taylor and Zayak arrived, and the narrative converges again. Gosen, Taylor, and Zayak left the Grand Hyatt and around 4:30 p.m. boarded the high-speed train from Tokyo. The cars were packed, with passengers standing in the aisles, and the three men rode in silence. Arriving in Osaka a little after 8 p.m., they returned to the hotel, where Taylor plugged in his phone so it could finish updating and headed to the airport alone. Taylor explained to the terminal manager that his party was running late. They would need to rush through security, he said, so they could take off on schedule for an important meeting in Istanbul. He handed the manager an envelope which contained the equivalent of $1,000 in Japanese yen. When she insisted that the tip was too large, he took out half and gave the rest back. Then Taylor returned to the hotel, where he took the speaker out of the larger of the two boxes and placed it in the smaller box to make room for Gosen, who climbed in. Taylor shut the lid and secured the latch. A little before 10 p.m., Taylor and Zayak wheeled the boxes into two waiting vans and headed for the airport. The drivers and airport staff had been on duty since that morning. None of them suspected anything, but Taylor would have been ready with a cover story. He and his friend had attended a violin concert in Osaka, and he had the tickets to prove it. In fact, Taylor had prepared cover stories for every day that December. He had also worked out what he would do if a customs official opened the boxes, or if Gosen panicked. He declined to share those contingencies, saying they would have involved illegal activities. Taylor arrived only 20 minutes before the flight was scheduled to take off at 10:30 p.m. He helped the baggage handlers unload the two boxes, explaining that they contained sensitive equipment and needed to be moved with care. Elite travelers already live in a world without borders. Taylor and Zayak were rushed through security. Nothing got X-rayed, not even our backpacks, Taylor recalls. On the tarmac, workers pushed the smaller box containing the speakers onto a conveyor belt to the cargo hold. Then they picked up the second box, with Gosen inside, and pushed it up the same belt. One of the workers handed Taylor the money he had paid the manager, explaining that it was against the company's policy to accept tips. Once the aircraft doors were shut, Taylor went back to the cargo hold. He cracked open the box and told Gosen that he would get him when they were airborne. He grabbed a towel from the bathroom and used it to keep the lid ajar. At 11:10 p.m., the flight took off. Taylor and Zayak had been in Japan for 13 hours. When Taylor returned to check on Gosen, the fugitive executive was sitting cross-legged atop the box, beaming. The plane made its way west, staying in Chinese or Russian airspace at Taylor's request to avoid the risk of refueling in a country, such as South Korea, that has an extradition treaty with Japan. The charter company had informed the flight attendant that the VIP guests wanted privacy on the flight back, so she stayed in the galley and never entered the main cabin. Gosen ate before going to bed. Taylor sat in a chair next to him while he slept. The plane landed in Istanbul at 5:26 a.m. On December 30. Gosen was whisked to a second plane waiting 100 yards away, destined for Beirut. Taylor was focused on completing the job and there were no thank you or goodbyes. Taylor and Zayek then took a taxi to the commercial airport to catch a commercial flight, also headed to Beirut. By the time Taylor landed in Beirut, the news of Gosen's escape had already broken in the local press. But it wasn't until the following Tuesday that Japanese authorities realized that Gosen was gone by reading about it in the Lebanese media. One of the world's most famous prisoners was now an international fugitive. Gosen was greeted with a hero's welcome in Lebanon, where he met with President Michel Aoun and other dignitaries. He claimed to have organized his own escape and held a press conference in which he denounced Japan for subjecting him to injustice and political persecution. He likened his experience to Pearl Harbor. Japan issued a warrant for the arrest of both Gosen and his wife, who is accused of perjury, for lying about her contact with a witness. Interpol issued a red notice for Gosen, asking law enforcement worldwide to locate and arrest him, pending extradition to Japan. As Taylor was going from superhero for hire back to suburban dad, the Japanese authorities were planning a grand gesture of their own. On January 30, the Tokyo District Court issued a warrant for Taylor's arrest, and soon thereafter Japan formally asked the United States to arrest Taylor. The request came through diplomatic channels, first arriving at the State Department before it was forwarded to the Department of Justice, which passed it on to the U.S. Marshal's Service. And so it was in late May, that Taylor was asleep in his home in Harvard, Massachusetts when his 27-year-old son Peter shook him awake. Peter had been the first to hear the knock and answered the door. 15 U.S. Marshals were standing there. They did not want trouble, they explained, but they had come to pick up Taylor and his son. 4 days later, Taylor called me from the Norfolk County Jail in Dedham, Massachusetts. The first few days he sounded upset, mostly at his own government for chaining you up like you are Charlie Manson. We are going to go based on what the Japs said, even though it's wrong. We are going to take you out of your house in the middle of the night, early in the morning and rip up the Constitution. Indeed, the very offense for which Michael Taylor is charged in Japan demonstrates his aptitude for hatching escape plans on a grand scale and his blatant disrespect for bond conditions, the prosecutor's statement read. The plot to spirit Gosen out of Japan was one of the most brazen and well-orchestrated escape acts in recent history, involving a dizzying array of hotel meetups, bullet train travel, fake personas, and the chartering of a private jet. Even beyond the particularities of the Taylor case, bail is seldom granted in extradition cases which are neither civil nor criminal. Paul Kelly, Taylor's lead lawyer, and Dan Marino, a former Marine who defended Taylor in the Utah case, are building their defense on Article 103 of the Japanese Penal Code, which lists the punishment for harboring or enabling the escape of a person in confinement but says nothing of aiding and abetting an individual out on bail. In most countries, including Japan as well as the United States, violating bail terms is a misdemeanor or an administrative violation, in which one forfeits the bail money but does not face an additional charge. Rumors have placed the cost of the Gosen operation at $30 million. In fact, Taylor says, it cost Gosen around $1.3 million. Court documents show that Gosen wired nearly $1 million in expenses to a company connected to the Taylors. Most of that went toward the jet charter and paying the team. How much did Taylor make for his role in planning and orchestrating Gosen's escape? Nothing, he tells me. Taylor says that Gosen, whose personal wealth has been estimated at $120 million, has not offered to compensate him. Taylor had assumed a kind of gentleman's agreement when it came to payment, as is common in his world. Smuggling a fugitive out of Japan, after all, isn't exactly the kind of job for which you draw up a contract. If I did it for the money, he says, that money would have been paid in advance. If not for the money, I ask, why do it? De oppresso liber, he answers, quoting the motto of the Special Forces. He was liberating the oppressed. From the Vanity Fair magazine, July/August 2020, 12 Recipe Corner, Ms. Sundareswari. Hello friends! As I promised you in our last issue, I am back here with a new recipe that is curry leaves powder, or Kariveppalai podi in Tamil. This powder is good for digestion, good for our eyes, good for our hair growth, and also for BP and diabetes. In every Indian cuisine we do use curry leaves in our day-to-day cooking, but at the same time we also have the habit of picking it and throwing it in the dustbin in spite of knowing all these benefits. If we make like this kind of powder, from child to elders, all the people will like it for its flavor and taste. Let us start making it. Ingredients: 1 curry leaves -4 handful, cleaned and dried. 2 urad dal 4 tablespoons. 3 chana dal 3 tablespoons. 4 jeera 1 tablespoon. 5 red chili 10 numbers. 6 dhania seeds 1 tablespoon. 7 garlic pods 8 to 10. 8 hing 1/4 teaspoon. 9 turmeric 1/2 teaspoon. 10 oil 1 tablespoon. 11 salt as per taste, crystal salt. Method: heat oil in a frying pan and add urad dal, chana dal, dhania seeds, jeera, red chilies, and roast it in a low flame till it gets roasted, without overburning, leaving a good roasted smell. Remove it from the fire, keep it aside. In the same fry pan put curry leaves, hing and turmeric. Switch off the stove and roast all the 3 ingredients. Let all these roasted things get cool and altogether, put it in a mixer jar, adding salt to that, and make it into a powder. It should be coarsely powdered. Put it in an airtight container. You can eat this with idli, dosa, hot rice along with til oil or ghee. You can also use it for sabzi to increase the taste and the flavor. Hope you all enjoy. Meet you again with a new recipe in our next issue, in our Health is Wealth column. Till then, goodbye, stay healthy, cheer you. Ms. Sundareswari, Program Coordinator Mitra